Hello, welcome to the Mediocre Takes podcast, the podcast where we share our mediocre takes on the shows and movies we watch. I'm Marco and I'm here with my co host Mel. How are you doing, Mel?
It's getting really hot again.
Yeah, I had to walk somewhere for a job interview and it hurt walking.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, so today we're going to be covering Love, Death, and Robots, which is a sci fi anthology. I just want to mention that when I was rewatching the show, I noticed they changed the order of which episodes were released in which order because the first episode originally was Sonny's Edge, but now when I rewatched it, it was actually Three Robots. I just find that weird.
So that was there from the beginning.
Really?
Yeah,
No, I could have
because
sworn.
Sonny's Edge was also the first, but then my brother looked at it on his and it was different. The order was different.
Oh, that's weird. Maybe they just do that person to person.
Maybe there was a conspiracy theory that it had to do with whether or not you were gay.
Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, I just want to mention that because it might change how you see the series at first. It might be a different first episode for you. But yeah, we're gonna get into this with the three robots first. The three robots. No, I don't know how to say the robots' names, so I'm just gonna call them based how they look. This episode starts with the humanoid robot crushing a skull while saying that they're probably lost. The triangle robot takes a picture of the dead bodies. The small red-orange robot finds a ball and then the humanoid robot bounces it. They talk about how humans need a mouth to take in energy. Then they see a cat and it gets on the humanoid robot and then the robot pets it and tries to make it go away. They think if they don't stop petting the cat, it will explode. It does not. They find an Xbox 3 and explain that it's an early computer entertainment system. This leads to the humanoid robot searching up what teabagging is because I don't remember actually, but he just searches it up and then he feels grossed out. Then they find a nuclear bomb, I think, and talk about how because humans hubris, they didn't last long. Then a cat starts talking and says if they don't stop petting the rest of the cats, then they'll explode. And that's how the episode ends. I really liked this episode when I first watched it. Well, I don't totally love it. I find it like overly haha human bad because they were like too holier than thou. Like, I think there is space for stories like this. I just want some less human bad all the time. It felt too unnuanced, I guess. But I guess this is just comedy, so it doesn't really matter. I like the fact that the humanoid robot is the butt of the joke for most of the episode. I personally find this episode funny, but I don't think it's as dark as people make it out to be. I like that the little robot says he's the descendant of baby monitors. I found that to be a really good line. I find the animation to be pretty good in all episodes. And by the way, is every episode in the show animated?
Types of animation, yeah.
Okay. Like every episode knocks it out of the park. I just think this is a well written episode, but I don't love it as much as I used to.
So I really like the design of all three of the robots, especially since they're based off of electronics we already have, like the console and the baby monitor. The official names of the robots, by the way, they are a little convoluted. We have like XPOT 4000, KVRC, and 11-45-G, and of course, 1145G was my favorite.
Which one was that one? That had your favorite lines?
The black triangle lady.
Oh, okay.
One of my favorite ways to critique literally anything is to explain it with like technical terms. So like the hypocrisy and the ridiculousness of it becomes really obvious. And I think using these advanced robots going on an apocalypse tour was a great way of showing the ridiculousness of the human race. And I do agree that there is like no nuance to whatever they were saying, but I don't think they were trying to do anything. I love the dynamic between the three robots. They all had discernible personalities and body types. The little spiel that the 1145G gave at the end and how the human race was ended was so realsies, but also made it so ironic that the message was about environmental issues and how humans are stupid. I'm not going to spoil it, but remember this because I am going to bring it up in season 3 because I learned something about the show and what they did. So just keep that in mind. The environmental message was ironic. So the next episode that we will be reviewing is Alternate Histories. This film is structured like an advert for an app called Multiversity, where you can modify anything in history and see its future effects. We were shown the most popular change, which is what if Hitler died? and we get to see 6 possible outcomes. The first is where Hitler is killed at the steps of an art college by a couple of Jewish men after he runs into a Jewish kid and yells at him. World War I still happens. World War II is delayed but still happens, and we drop the bombs on Berlin. In scenario 2, he almost runs into the kid and then gets run over by a carriage filled with bratwursts. That results in Austria becoming an automotive powerhouse after adding a lot of restrictions to carriages. World War I happens, and the Nazis win because of their advanced technology. In scenario 3, he's killed by a jello machine that is then used to kill all the enemies of some douche. And World War II starts and quickly ends. Putin is the first man on the moon. In scenario 4, Hitler dies in an orgy. The sex workers are being convicted before they expose themselves as being travelers from a parallel dimension where they inform everyone about sexy pleasure. In scenario 5, he's killed by a meteor and then an asteroid hits the planet, killing 93% of all species. The underground rats evolve and learn about nationalism, which ends the world again. Then a peaceful squid civilization forms. Scenario 6 starts with time-traveling Nazis and anti-Nazis fighting over him. They're all killed by older Hitler in a suit. He breaks the first rule of time travel, which is don't touch your doppelganger, and is killed by space-time paradox. And that is the end. I don't have much to say about this particular film. I wasn't like much a fan of the animation. I did like how different it was from the other films with how it was sort of formatted in a commercial. I think the only accurate way to depict Hitler in anything is to show him acting like a little piss baby. And I do think we should make more art where Hitler is being killed.
This episode was really funny. I love the fact that we make fun of Hitler, and that's it. That's all I have to say.
Wow. Okay, so next is the dump. So we start off with some loser city inspector going to a dump to evict Ugly Dave. Dave starts telling a story. He tells a story about him and his friend Pearlie and their first encounter with Otto. Pearlie is first to spot the monstrosity while pissing, and he runs back to Dave. Pearlie ends up getting grabbed by the balls by some mucousy substance that came out of the monster and is eaten. Dave shoots it and chases it before realizing there was a doggy attached to the monster. He realizes the monster was created from and lived off garbage, and he turns it into his pet. After he ends the story, Otto finally comes over to Dave and then slurps up the asshole inspector. So this is also a film I'm not too fond of. Not because of the story, but because the animators did a great job of making it feel so icky. Like, I could smell the film. Also, I didn't like seeing Hillbilly Wiener. The idea of having a monster pet is kind of cool though. I think the fact that it has a cute little dog attached to it made its mucus tentacles tolerable. Also, that inspector had it coming, honestly.
I don't really like the dump. First of all, the animation is once again amazing, but overall the story left me feeling like it was a waste of my time. I mean, it was kind of funny when he literally murdered a person and barely seemed sad about his friend dying, but I don't know, it just wasn't my thing, you know? Okay, next
Okay.
is Beyond the Kilo Rift. This episode starts out with our main characters discussing something about a search killing them. They go into these chambers and go through some kind of portal. Then the main character wakes up and something is wrong, and he wakes up a character named Susie. Then someone called Greta walks into the ship. Susie doesn't have enough energy and she falls unconscious. Greta and Tom, who is the main character, have a talk about the Kilo Rift and how close they are to it. Tom mentions how strange it is to see her again. They hook up. Then Greta tells him that the routing era took him farther than expected. Tom learns that Earth is now 150 years in the future and he's stuck in Salmaki. They wake up Susie and Susie tries to attack Greta. Tom notices that Greta's wound has healed and he realizes that Greta isn't the person that she seems to be. Fake Greta tells Tom that Tom is still in his tank asleep. Then Tom sees who Greta really is, which is a disgusting monster. and he falls asleep once again into the same illusion the monster made. Once again, the animation is amazing for this episode. I really love the plot twist in this episode about the monster being absolutely disgusting and the way it seems to care for those who are lost in a weirdly strange way. I really like the design of the monster because of how well it looks and how well animated it is. The sex scene in this episode made me uncomfy because I saw a lot of the fake boob. Overall, this was an amazing horror sci-fi episode.
This is actually one of my least favorite episodes, mostly because it has two of my least favorite things you can have in a film: heterosexuality and spider like monsters. Spiders in general don't scare me, but artists have a talent for making them so disgusting. And Mother Nature, too, if you've ever heard of the spider crab, very horrible creature. It doesn't make it any better that the spider space monster is the baddie of the film. I actually think this is like my least favorite episode in total, and not just because of the too explicit CGI sex scene, but because the fucking space spider monster it absorbed the memories of these lost astronauts and tried to create a false reality for the main character and had like mind sex with him over and over and over again to try and what to calm him down. Bitch, just kill him. But I do think one of the most egregious choices made was that the main character's name is Tom with an H.
Sucker of
Sucker of
Souls.
Souls. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we start in the middle of the story with Flynn and Dr. Wayhunt, is I think how you pronounce it, running from a monster. And then we are thrown back to the beginning where a student named Simon is translating some writings that they found. Simon then witnesses a monster in the tomb that ends up eating him, and we see it get stronger off of his blood. The monster then goes after Flynn and Wehunt. They start running to try and get to a room where Vicky and Gary are. And as they're running, the monster ends up catching Flynn. And we also find out that the monster is Dracula. But before it can eat him, a cat walks by, and we find out that Dracula is afraid of a little puss. Sounds a bit gay to me. They make it to the safe room where they then booby trap the room before blasting Dracula with some bullets and then leaving through a hidden exit. Dracula is then blasted again with some C4. They make it through the tunnel, and as they light up the tunnel, they realize they are basically in a vampire nest, and then it ends there.
And they
Okay.
probably die.
Well, no, we don't know that for a fact. Okay, maybe Gary made it out alive. I love the animation of this film. It has this roughness to it that reminds me of an animation short you find on YouTube. The banter between the characters are funny. Gary, of course, is my favorite. I think she's a great comic relief. And I really liked this portrayal of Dracula. I think we get the very humanoid version of him way too much in media because it's much easier to make him sexy that way. But I think that the monster version is so much more interesting. And I liked how we got to see the humanoid version of him in the beginning, but as he got stronger, he turned more into like the monster version. And they totally made it out alive.
This one was surprisingly better than I expected. I liked the idea of Dracula versus an ex-soldier. Sadly, this just wasn't the best story compared to the rest. While I do like it, I will admit that it's weaker than the rest of the stories, but still better than the yogurt story. I will say that this episode felt overly vulgar for me. I mean, I don't mind it, but eventually it's just not that funny anymore. I really love the different animation style of this episode, and it's great.
Well, speaking of yogurt, that's the next episode that we're going to talk about. So, when the yogurt took over, this film is structured like a documentary, kind of. We're told by a narrator that it all started when the researchers took one of the most advanced strands of human DNA and grafted it onto the bacteria used to ferment yogurt. One of the researchers brought some of the bacteria home to make her own yogurt, and the yogurt she made became sentient. After she poured some oats into the yogurt, it spoke to her, with its first sentence being, "We've solved fusion, take us to your leaders." It said that it can solve many of our problems, and in return, it wanted Ohio. Which, can I just say, if any state was going to be taken over by a sentient dairy product, of course it was going to be Ohio. They got a lease on the state and continued to evolve. They gave plans over to the president to eradicate the national debt, and the politicians, of course, fucked it up, and the country basically fell to ruin with people making baby soup. The president gave all his power to the yogurt, where martial law was declared. And after like 10 years of protest, it became one of those utopian worlds. The documentary ends with the narrator telling us that the yogurt went into space for a pack of cigarettes and milk and hasn't come back yet. Yeah, so not one of my favorite episodes. There is this thing called like corporate animation or something where if you sort of look at like Fred Meyer adverts, that's basically what it is. And I feel like the animation of this was sort of in that spectrum, which is why I didn't really like it. But the premise of it was pretty interesting. It's one of the more out there things that I haven't really even thought of before. So I give it props for originality and also being realistic with Ohio being taken over. Yeah, I mean, oh, and they were pretty realistic with how they were literally giving a solution to the to the president, and they still managed to fuck it up. It wasn't the best, but it was also I think I watched this in between some of the more serious episodes, so it was a nice like break from all the heaviness of some of the previous episodes.
This was a short and cute episode, even though I thought it was kind of weird. I find it weird how there's nudity in this episode, even though it doesn't really feel like it needs to be there. Like you see boobs again, and it's just like, why? Like it's literally like a silly yogurt episode. It doesn't
We
need to
also
be
see
there.
dead baby soup.
Yeah. Um. Wait, what? I don't remember that.
Dead baby soup.
What?
You don't remember that?
No, I
They
don't.
did this really cool transition where they were showing the utopic Ohio, and this girl was holding her baby. She lifted it in the air, and then when she was about to grab it again, it quickly switched to the outside of America, where you see this homeless man with a ladle with a dead baby in it, and he was
Oh.
making dead baby soup.
Oh. I need to rewatch it then, because I don't remember that.
It's the best
Um.
scene in the whole film.
I said to Mal that at first when I watched the show, I thought it was called Love, Sex, and Robots, and she said it might as well be because of how much sex and nudity there is in this show. And I don't know if I find it weird that there's nudity in this episode of all episodes. Overall, this episode was okay, but it's probably my least favorite. Okay, Sonny's Edge. So basically, this is an episode about like monsters fighting, and the man tells the woman that he wants her to lose on purpose, and she says no. Well, she doesn't say no, but her like entourage or something says no. Then it's time for the fight. Now I think they connect their brains to the beast, and then it's time to fight. Like they use this headgear to connect their like brains to the beast, and they fight. Sonny wins. Then after the fight, someone sneaks into Sonny's room. The intruder talks to Sonny and they make out a bit and then they talk about what happened to her. Then they start to make out again, only for the intruder to attack Sonny. The man who tried to make them lose on purpose realizes Sonny isn't in that body. Then the real Sonny kills the woman and the man. The real Sonny turns out to be inside the monster. Okay, so a lot of people get confused about what happened in this episode, and so I'm gonna explain it. Basically, Sonny was terribly assaulted, and because of that, her brain was damaged, and somehow her brain went into the beasts, I think. And that's why when Sonny's talking about her edge, she says it's literally because she is the beast, and whenever she fights, she has to risk her own life. I've seen a few people get confused about this episode, and I just wanted to make it clear. I was looking at some people saying that Sonny's sexuality was unnecessary, but I found it to be such a necessary part of the story, and I was so annoyed by that comment. I love the twist episode where we realized that Sonny was actually the beast. Like, that was amazing writing.
Okay, I just want to say I'm so happy that I don't read what other people think about stuff because everything you said about them, first of all, not understanding the message of the film and then being upset that she was gay. Oh my god, people are so fucking stupid. This is one of my favorite films out of all of them. The story is fairly generic. The animation quality is what I'd expect. And the voice acting was pretty great, some of the best in the whole series. But I think what I like the most was the twist and the ending and how satisfying it was, especially the last line Asani says. I think they did a great job setting it up to make it seem like it's all about her trauma, especially since there was parallels between being assaulted and the fight scene. The fight scene in general was amazing. I think the contrast of both the kaijus, some may say, was cool. How Sony was all about dexterity and the other was all about, brute strength. And I especially like the opponent's Bone Blade. That shit was wicked. And okay, and also just like the violence in this episode was so good. I really liked the whole Wolverine scene where her like blades went into Sonny's face and then she just fucking stomped her skull in. And then when Sonny as the monster came back and fucking punched a blade straight through that asshole's head, that shit was so good. Anyway, good, great, amazing episode. One of my favorites. Next episode, Fish Night. We start with seeing a failing car in the middle of the desert with two people in it. The old man checks the engine and says it's dead. He decides that they should camp out until the next day and walk back to the nearest town. Once the sun starts setting, we see lights dancing across the desert floor as the old man starts talking about how the desert used to be a sea. He wonders if creatures, like fish, can haunt where they used to be. As the night goes on, the car comes back to life, and the old and young man wake up to see the light spirits of the fish who used to live there. The young man becomes infatuated with them, and he starts chasing them. He takes his clothes off and jumps off of some rocks, where he floats into the sky with the fish. He is then eaten by Ghost Megalodon. The fishes fade away, and the old man stands there alone with a dead car and one man down. So, I love the animation style. It's kind of a new style, but it has become more and more popular. I think this is one of the more creative and beautiful ways to show purgatory and death, which is what I think they were trying to show. Like, I think when the car came back to life and the fish appeared, that was sort of purgatory, the place where spirits with unfinished businesses resided. And the young man joined purgatory, where he was then able to be eaten and then moved on to death, which is why he disappeared. That's like the critical thinking part of my brain. And then the other part of my brain likes to believe that they were both just starting to hallucinate. And then the young man got a little too kooky and he got naked, jumped off a bunch of rocks, fell, cracked his head open, and died. And that's what brought the old man back to reality. Last thing, I think the little fishies were pretty, and I loved how colorful it was. It was like Glowfish if Glowfish were cool.
I really loved the animation in this episode, especially the way the fish looked. They were amazing. I find it funny that the dude literally gets eaten by a fish and all because he wants to swim and turn into a fish or something like that. And then he turned into this ghost person. Like, it was a weird but smart concept. I like this one, but it left me wondering what happens after it. Like, why did he suddenly turn into a ghost thing? Like, maybe it's just like what you said. Like, it was about, what did you say it was about?
Purgatory and death.
Yeah. It was just about that, but I was looking at it more realistically and I was like wondering what was happening. Alright, next episode is Suits. This episode starts off with the husband and wife mention that there's something outside where they live, and the husband gets into some kind of mech. Then the wife calls the neighbors for help, and one of them is Jay. So basically, there are these portals that lead to monsters coming into the house, and they're fighting these monsters, but they realize there's more portals than there are people, so they won't be able to make it out of the fight alive for the most part. So they tell their family to go into a bunker, and they realize that they won't be able to go to the bunker because they're out there fighting. And then Jake sacrifices himself. Then a giant monster comes out of a portal. Hank fights it. They manage to kill the monster, and Hank and the woman survive. I kind of like this episode. It's okay. Found the action to be really amazing. Like, the animation was absolutely stunning, but the story itself, I'm not sure I love that much. I will say I enjoyed the little twist at the end when we get to see that most of the planet has fallen to these monsters, and now there are only these little pockets where people survive. I will say Jake was a real one. Rip him. I feel like I feel like this episode could have been turned into a movie.
Yeah, I really like the animation style of this film. How it's made in a way to make it seem like it's sort of stop motion-y. I think the most popular example of this is like the animated Spider-Man films. I also really liked the world in general with like the land bubbles and the mech suits. The fight scenes were great, and I'm slowly starting to really like mech fighting. This was a short episode, but okay, to me at least, they were capable of like creating characters and scenes that made me at least feel for these characters, especially with the self-sacrifice at the end. I did, feel bad for the wife. I'm still trying to, have empathy for men. I'm working on it. It's slow, but I'm getting there. All right, up next is The Witness. What a doozy. All right, so We open up with a woman getting ready, and that same woman is being beaten to death by some guy in an apartment complex right across from hers. She ends up seeing the man and runs. Confused with seeing the woman he just murdered in the building across from him, he chases after her. She calls the cop and then just goes on with her day. She makes it to her job, and her future killer also enters her place of work where he is entertained by other workers. The future victim is performing before making eye contact with her killer and then runs away to find her friend Vladimir, who is indisposed. So she takes his gun and runs. He chases after her and they end up in his apartment where they fight, and she ends up killing him with her gun. She then looks outside the window to see the man she just killed across from her in another apartment who just witnessed what she did. And then it ends there, basically insinuating that they are in some sort of loop. Okay, so there's only a few things I want to say about this film. This felt like a film Harley Quinn would make, and that's just the best way I can describe the style of it. The story was interesting. I don't know if there is a specific word for this type of story. I know that like you can say loop, but I feel like it's more complex than that. It's similar to Groundhog Day, but not exactly. When I did first watch this show, I watched it with my brother, and during the performance scene, I I just there was so much leather and groping. I turned off the whole show and made us watch some Bob Ross. I did like her coworker with the leather horns though. That was so slay.
So I think this was a really amazing episode, but it's kind of bogged down by its nudity. Like there was way too much of it and it's all over the place. Like I saw her I saw her with JJ and it was gross. And it was like very full frontal. Um and it left me feeling uncomfortable. Now I wonder who's writing all these episodes with a bunch of nudity. Like is it just all of these like who's writing this? Is it all the same person? Because that would make sense.
Men.
Men, yeah, probably men. I'm kind of confused of the point of this episode. Other than that, it's some kind of time loop thing. It's interesting. And the next episode is Good Hunting. This episode starts out with a man saying that when he was a child, the whole world was full of magic. Then the narrator, who is a boy at the time, asks, when will the vixen come? Which is some kind of sexual spirit. Then they see the vixen. The father attacks the vixen but fails to kill her. They spray some kind of liquid on the vixen to show her true form. Then the boy meets another vixen that's a different from the one they were hunting. Like it was a pup from the adult vixen. The father kills the mother vixen, and then the father asks the boy if there are any vixen pups, and he says no. The vixen pup runs away. Then it's years later after his father has died, and the vixen pup and the son talk about how magic is draining from the world. The son tells the vixen that he's leaving the village. He ends up in Hong Kong. He sees a bunch of men talking up a woman who clearly doesn't want to be there. Then he defends the woman, and we find out that the woman is actually the vixen that they met a long time ago. They talk about what's happened now that the white men have taken over. The vixen comes to the man one night. The vixen tells the man that the vixen met the governor who cut up her body, and now she has a mechanical body. She tells the son that she wants to hunt the men who think they can own them, and she wants her to help him, and he agrees. He helps her become a robotic vixen, and she ends up killing a bunch of people. Once again, I hate how much excessive nudity there is in this show, but I think this was still a really good episode. I love the fact that we get to see the shapeshifter change into a robotic spirit to fight men who try to own these women. It's absolutely an amazing story, and I loved it. I would say this is one of the best episodes in the series. It's so good, even if there's some nudity in it. I like the change from old to new. It's really aesthetic and cool looking.
Um, I wish I didn't see the animated penises. I think my life would have been better if I've never seen them. I do love the fight scenes. The chase scene in the beginning and how fluid the movements were was so good. Also, the way they drew the fucking colonizing English losers is so funny. Like, they look so goofy. I loved it. This was like a steampunk world, and I love the little machines. Also, I find the robotic form of, was it Jan, was so cool, and I loved how she became like the cool version of Batman that actually kills bad people. Our next film is Ice Age. So Ice Age starts off with a couple moving into their new apartment. The boyfriend, Rob, makes a comment about how old refrigerators, like the one left in their apartment, are actually smarter than the modern ones. The girlfriend, Gail, sorry, those names are just really stupid, pours them both a glass of red wine, and Rob opens the fridge to get an ice cube. We then see literally just a rectangle full of ice, and Rob pulls out an ice tray that was conveniently in the middle of the mini tundra. Without thoroughly inspecting any of the ice cubes, he pops one out and plunks it in his glass of wine. After they take a sip, Rob notices his ice cube is a little funky, and after taking a closer look, they notice a tiny mammoth with spears in it, which is why I believe this short film is actually part of the Ice Age animated film universe. After inspecting the freezer for more, they find a lost civilization that's evolving quickly. The next time they look, they see the Industrial Revolution and then about the 20th or 21st century. Once they get to about modern age, civilization starts a nuclear war. Yay. After that, they close the fridge, they order a pizza, and in about an hour, they check back and see a futuristic city. A what I think was sort of like a teleportation machine or something was built, and we see this explosion of color with what I think are like spaceships just flying around the kitchen. And then they all come together into this small ball of energy and implode into nothing and disappear. Thinking they won't come back, they take the refrigerator plug out so the ice can thaw overnight. In the morning, they check to see dinosaurs and primates kissing.
You
Okay.
mean the dinosaurs killing the primates?
They were kissing.
Okay.
This was a very different film from the rest, mostly because our main characters are real life actors. The only CGI we see is in the small civilization scenes. And when I first watched this, I thought it was like pretty boring. But, with my second watch through, I realized it was actually pretty interesting, especially since they did decide to have more human qualities than the other films.
Okay, this is a really cute episode and I liked it a lot. I really like how original this plot feels. I don't know, something about the mini civilization living in our fridge. It really feels fresh to me and it's pretty different from the rest of the season, so I liked it personally. I like the fact that time moves fast for the civilization, so there's always something new to look at in this episode. Making time move fast was a smart choice. I like how after they think the civilization is over, they open the fridge the next day, only to see dinosaurs and primates. I like the part where the two people inside the fridge comment on the people watching them outside of the fridge. I think they said, "Look at those jackasses watching us." Oh, is it my turn?
Is it?
Yeah, shapeshifters. The furry one.
Ooh.
Stop.
Wolf. What is it? Wolf,
Wolf people?
alpha beta.
Stop.
Right?
Okay, they're totally gay for each other. I'm just saying
They're
that.
so gay for each other.
Yeah. Okay. The next episode is Shapeshifters. This episode starts off with military men talking about sleeping with a woman when someone starts shooting the military men. Then the shapeshifter and some other military men argue about shapeshifters and how they're different from people. Then one of them gets called in to do some work. That's when the main character hears some bullets being shot while he's sleeping, and he finds the dead bodies of his friends and other army members, and he finds out that there's another shapeshifter out there who's killed his friend. He searches for the other shapeshifter and he finds the shapeshifter the next day and they start to fight at night. He defeats the other shapeshifters, then he leaves. Then he comes back to the military camp and he smells his friend because, like, I don't know, to keep his scent or something like that. And then
He's gay for him.
yeah, or that. Yeah, probably that one. And then he quits the military. This episode was really gay, like really, just
Yeah,
it's so obvious.
especially when the one of the guys started talking about how he wanted to like bang his buddy's sister. That was like so gay.
Yeah,
Like you were
exactly.
obviously covering up your gayness.
Yeah, we all know you're just using that as a beard. I still wasn't the biggest fan of it. Okay, so I hate people who are super nationalists, and this guy said America is still my country, and I was like, oh my god, dude, shut up, pack it up. Like, it was so annoying. The nudity was once again unnecessary, and I hated it. I kind of had bad vibes because of this episode. It felt a little bit racially charged, but then again, it's probably a metaphor for racism, so it's probably not as big of a deal as I'm making it out to be. And I liked how he quit in the end, and yeah, they're totally gay for each other.
And of course, they followed the rule of, gays in films. One of them had to die.
Yeah, exactly.
I think they were realistic with the dynamic between the humans and werewolves, how they treated the werewolves as more animal than man, and how the military sees them as tools or weapons. The monster fight was pretty cool. I liked how they shed their skin. That was really gross. We only saw a little peen, and my favorite
A
part was
little.
how he like my favorite part was how he like fit half the old guy's face in his mouth before crunching down. And like I had no empathy for him in the beginning cuz he's like a fucking army soldier, but he did defect, so a couple points to that. It only took his bestie being mauled to death, but whatever it takes, I guess. Helping Hand is next. So we start off in space and meet our main character, Alex, who is an astronaut sent to fix a satellite. She suits up and makes her way to the satellite. As she's fixing it, a stray screw hits her oxygen tank and she ends up floating into space. She calls for help, but she finds out that the rescue team wouldn't make it in time. She floats there for a while and screams for a bit. She then realizes she can use part of her suit to throw and push herself back to the satellite. So she tightens her watch around her upper arm and takes the glove off. She throws the glove, which pushes her to the satellite, but she misses it and flies away again. So she then probably thinks to herself, fuck it, and breaks off her frozen arm. She throws it and is able to make it back to her ship, where she then informs home base she's fine. I don't know how realistic something like this is, but I thought it was really cool. When she was stuck alone in space, I was able to feel that same anxiety that she was feeling, like that feeling of anxiety that wells up in you when you're stuck and you don't know if you'll be able to get out. And also the ending scene where she calls back to home base or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, do you still need a hand?" That was like so funny to me. And yeah, I don't know. I really like this character. I don't know why. I think it's because she's Irish. Not that I have anything for Irish people. Of course I wouldn't, but I
I'm
liked
judging
her.
you hardcore now.
No, no, but we need to. Okay, but to defend myself, I'm saying the Irish, not the English. Can I just make that little difference?
Okay.
Okay, and I'm not saying that I like her. She's a little CGI animated character. It'd be ridiculous if I liked her.
This was such a hard episode to watch. When I first rewatched this episode, I forgot that she loses her hand, and I didn't remember whether she made it out alive or not, so I had a sinking feeling when I was watching it. I absolutely hated this and loved it at the same time. This almost feels horror like the horrors of space and the sacrifices one has to make to live in space. Once again, I really love the animation of this episode and all of the episodes. They look amazing. So the next episode is Blind Spot. This episode starts out with a bunch of people riding cars, then a bomb goes off and the people they're stealing from realizes there's something out there. They fight and then Bob, the robot that's helping them steal, forgot to mention that there's a big robot that beats up one of the characters. The robot turns into a car and goes after them, and then they try destroying the robot's CPU, and Rookie, who is basically the main character of this episode, is the only one who survives because the robot kills like literally everyone else. But Rookie realizes that the robot helping them made copies of their brains, and so they're actually alive. And that's the end of this episode. This episode isn't that special overall, but I really liked it. And I hate to say this, but I kind of wish the other robot people stayed dead because that would have been a really cool way to end this episode. This episode felt a little cliche and stereotypical for me. I wanted more nuance from the story and characters. Well, mostly the characters. I think it was obvious from the beginning that Rookie would survive and the others wouldn't, or at least that Rookie would survive. But despite that, I still found this episode to be overall a fun time. Sure, there's nothing truly special about it, but it's just fun overall, and that's good enough for me.
This film was so cute. I think a much more PG version of this totally could have aired as a show in Cartoon Network in like the early 2010s. This was one of the few films I actually would want to be turned into a show. I really liked the style and like the color palette. The machines were so cool looking, and the whole film was basically a battle, and all the fighting scenes felt so fluid and nice. and I was really rocking with the music. Next, we have Lucky 13. So, we start with the narrator and main character telling us about how she got stuck with the quote unquote worst ship in her flight group. It was considered unlucky because it lost two crews and it was number 13. We see her go on a mission. As the ship touches down and releases the troops, fire comes from behind. The other ships that arrived with her were shot down, but she was able to collect all the surviving soldiers and successfully evade enemy ships after some sick maneuvers. The pilot, Colby, admits she was wrong about Lucky 13, and her ship ends up becoming one of the most lucky and successful ships. During one fight, the ship is shot out of the sky. The enemy surrounds the ship and she shoots them to cause a distraction so the troops can get away safe. Once she's out of ammo, she makes her way to escape. As she tries to leave the cockpit, her seatbelt gets stuck, preventing her from moving down. A missile is shot where she would have landed, and once it's clear, the seatbelt releases. She sets up the ship to explode, but when the timer ends, it doesn't. The enemy troops surround the ship. Once they're all around it, it detonates, killing all the enemies. So, the CGI was amazing, of course, and the story was so touching. And, okay, listen, how do I say this? I do, in a way, have more empathy for robots and machines than I do most people. So the relationship between Colby and Lucky 13 to me was so beautiful. Like, we got a few scenes where we got to see the cameras of Lucky 13 looking at Colby and stuff. And I feel like there were enough scenes to show that there was like a little friendship between them. And then I literally cried, no joke, when I realized that Lucky 13 was saving Colby. Something about that was so touching to like, I don't know, how this giant sentient ship basically save you because it thought you were like pretty cool. It's like your best friend. And this is one of my favorite films, mostly because I honestly wish that I had some sort of sentient robot who was like my best friend and that would like die for me.
I love this episode. Now, I don't know if this is what the writers were going for, but I'm pretty sure the plane was supposed to be alive or something like that because that's what I got from the episode. This is another really strong episode, and it's probably one of my favorites. But I don't know, something about war episodes just don't really do it for me. The main character is a really strong character, and it makes the episode even better. And I don't think it would have been that great without her. I 100% think the story wouldn't work well if it was a different character. I love Colby's relationship with the plane and how eventually she realizes the plane is more than just a plane. All right, the next episode we're talking about is Zima Blue. This episode starts off with a woman who talks about how she was going to talk to an artist called Zima Blue. She explains that he doesn't do portraits anymore. So he's an artist, and she explains that he used to do portraits, but now he doesn't do it anymore. And said he does mural art. Then one day he started adding blue squares and circles and shapes into his art. So he would do space art, and in the middle of it, there would be shapes. Just one shape, like a circle or a square or a rectangle. She says that Zima turned his skin blue and stuff like that. He did body modifications, and now he could see different colors, and he didn't need to breathe oxygen to live. So Zima ends up asking the main character for an interview, and when they meet up, Zima says that the swimming pool will be his last piece of art. He talks about a girl who made robotics and how this girl was fond of a specific robot that cleaned a swimming pool. She made the robot come to life. The main character realizes that Zima is the specific swimming pool robot. He talks about how when he was a little robot, that pool was all he needed to know. That was all he needed to live for. He explains that now he will submerge himself in water just as a cleaning robot, and he will remove all his brain functions, and he will simply clean the pool. And the episode ends with parts of himself being detached, and all that's left is the cleaning robot. So back when I first watched this, this wasn't the original ending, but now it is the original ending, and I just really loved this episode as the ending of the series. I think it's a really smart way to end the season, and I love it. The fact that Zima realizes that he needs to turn back to his original function to truly be at peace with the world is such a fascinating concept. This episode is truly art. I love the animation of this episode. This also is one of the best episodes animation wise for Love, Death, and Robots. It's really aesthetically pleasing, it's well written, and it's just beautiful.
I don't really know how I feel about the animation. Like, it's very stylized, and there are some scenes that I think look beautiful, but I don't think it's really my thing. The story also kind of reminded me how, like, artists will do the weirdest things. For example, like painting space rocks is something he did, and everyone will like call them geniuses and give them praise. And also how basically the media and fans and just people in general will sort of create their own stories about very popular figureheads, even if it's not true.
Yeah, like they will literally just like breathe and then people will go crazy over them.
Yes. I like the ending though. Him just wanting to revert to his original self. That was really nice. And it was just a cute little message. So, The Secret War. This film is set during World War II. A secret USSR army are investigating a village where they find no survivors. As they leave back into the woods, they spot some monsters. Their group successfully fends them off, but suffer some casualties. The other group of soldiers did not come to help after they shot the emergency flare. They encountered a frozen body that they realized is one of theirs. During the night, the other group fires their emergency flare, and the captain decides not to help them. The captain looks through the journal of the frozen man. The captain tells them about an assignment meant to summon creatures to possibly help them in the war. They were successful in summoning them, but not taming them. What they summoned is what they are fighting now. So they go to blow up a creature's nest and realize after detonating it that it was much bigger than they thought. They end up fighting a losing battle. And right before the battle starts, the captain tells one of the soldiers, who we find out is actually his son, to take their fastest horse and run to get help and inform the other groups to end up bombing the nest. The group all ends up dying, and we end with the scene of the nest being airstrike to hell. So this is one of my favorites, not just because the CGI was like really good, but because I really like the monster fighting. The monsters themselves are really cool, and the origins of them were much cooler. And it makes total sense that a government would want to hide a mistake like that and try to like cover it up so no one else finds out. The ending when the captain sends his son away literally made me cry the first time I watched it. Like, that little moment was just so impactful for me, and then, watching it again when one of the scenes before where the captain saved his son from being killed from one of the monsters just made that scene also more impactful, and I could totally see a movie being made from this. Would it be good? I think it'd be fine. I think they definitely make their money back in sales, but I don't think it would be a hit, so as a short film, it's amazing.
Okay, as you said, the action in this film was really great. I loved it. I will say I usually can't tell when realistic stuff is animated. Like when animators go for a realistic type of viewpoint, I can't really tell if it's like actual animation or not. But for this episode, I could actually tell that it was animated. I don't know what about it was it, and I don't even know if they were going for like a super realistic aesthetic or something like that. But I like the animation either way. I find it interesting that they realize that it's their own fault for summoning the demons, but they realize they'd be killed if anyone found out that was their fault.
Yeah, overall, it was a good volume. It had a lot of variety, and it has the most episodes out of all 3 of them, and I think there are pros and cons to it. I do sort of like the shorter episodes. With this longer volume, there are a lot more sort of ups and downs, and there's just I don't know, it's a lot. But it was nice, but it was a lot. So, I don't really have an issue with them making the shorter seasons. There were, I think, probably 5 that I really liked.
Like you said, there were a lot of like bangers, but at the same time, there were a lot of duds, which is like a pro and a con of this season. But like, I feel like the other seasons are a lot more polished in the sense that they're a lot better overall. I will say this season was really like nudity focused, I guess, or like sexual. And I feel like the later seasons start being less sexual for some reason. I don't know. But I like that improvement. I like the fact that the seasons get more polished overall later on. I like this season overall, and yeah. Anyways, you guys, that's our thoughts on Love, Death, and Robots Volume 1. If you want to send us a voice message on Anchor, there'll be a link in the description to do so. We also have an Instagram, Twitter, and a TikTok that we don't post on, which is at MidTakesPod. And we'll also leave that in the description below. And that's everything. So goodbye.